Vikings, let's win the game.
Vikings fans, three players who are absolutely critical to this team's success this season now have their futures in the hands of Nolan Teasley. At the same time, two veteran pass rushers are being linked to Minnesota as the franchise searches for answers on defense. And in the middle of all these decisions, one statement is creating debate across the NFL. Do the Vikings really have the best defense in the NFC North? With the new general manager facing his first major challenges and several important decisions quickly approaching, the tension is growing both inside and outside the building, and one of these decisions could end up shaping far more than just the start of the season. The first story isn't about flashy headlines, it's about the foundation of the roster. Three veterans who have become critical pieces of the purple and gold are entering the final year of their contracts, and new general manager Nolan Teasley has some major decisions staring him in the face. When you think about leadership, consistency, and identity, these are exactly the kinds of players you don't want walking out the door. Let's start with Blake Cashman. Sometimes national media still acts like he's just another linebacker. Vikings fans know better. This guy has become the heartbeat of the defense. The Eden Prairie native has delivered everything Minnesota hoped for and more since arriving in 2024. Over the last two seasons, he's piled up tackles, controlled the middle of the field, and become the kind of green dot linebacker every defense depends on. Even with injuries costing him a few games, his impact has been impossible to ignore. The Vikings drafted Jake Golday, but nobody inside the building views that move as a replacement plan. It feels more like a partnership for the future. Then there's Andrew Van Ginkel. Honestly, what else can you say at this point? Every time Brian Flores dials up something creative, it feels like Van Ginkel is right in the middle of it. His instincts, versatility, and football IQ make him one of the most unique defenders in the NFL. Since Jonathan Greenard is gone, his importance has only increased. The numbers speak for themselves, but beyond statistics, he's become one of those players who changes the emotional energy of a game with a single play. And then there's Brian O'Neill. For years, he has quietly done one of the hardest jobs in football at an elite level. Reliable, tough, professional, the kind of player every locker room needs. Some fans see rookie Caleb Tiernan as a future replacement, maybe someday. But why would you willingly move on from one of the most dependable leaders on your roster? These aren't just contract decisions. They're decisions about what kind of team the Vikings want to be over the next few years. Teasley has some difficult choices ahead, and the clock is already ticking toward Week 1. Now let's talk about something that has become one of the biggest debates among Vikings fans this offseason: the pass rush. Ever since Jonathan Greenard was traded away, there's been one question hanging over this defense. Is there enough depth? Dallas Turner is expected to take a huge leap, and many fans are excited about that possibility. But asking one young player to replace an impact defender overnight is risky business. That's why a familiar NFL veteran is suddenly entering the conversation. Former Vikings linebacker Ben Lieber recently suggested Kyle Van Noy as a potential target, and honestly, the argument makes some sense. This isn't about finding a superstar. This is about finding experience. Finding someone who has seen every situation imaginable and knows how to affect games when the moment gets big. Lieber described Van Noy as one of those players who always seems to show up when a game hangs in the balance. Even at 35 years old, there's still respect around the league for what he brings to a defense. Last season wasn't his most productive statistically, but veterans like this often offer value that doesn't show up on a stat sheet. Leadership, preparation, situational football. Those things matter, especially for a team trying to remain among the NFC contenders. Minnesota currently has cap space available, and Teasley now controls how aggressive this roster-building process becomes. Coming from Seattle's front office background, he understands how valuable pass rush depth can be during a long season. One injury can completely change the equation. The question is whether he views Van Noy as the right fit. Because if the Vikings believe they're one veteran away from stabilizing a potential weakness, this discussion could become very real in a hurry. But if Kyle Van Noy represents experience, another name being discussed brings a slightly different appeal. There's something about certain players that instantly commands respect the moment they enter a locker room. Players whose careers tell the story before they ever say a word. That's where Cameron Jordan enters the conversation. Ben Lieber recently made it clear that if he had to pick one veteran edge rusher for Minnesota, Jordan would be at the top of his list. Not because he expects 15 sacks, not because he expects prime Cameron Jordan. It's because of everything else: leadership, professionalism, accountability, the voice everyone listens to when adversity hits. There's also a personal connection that makes this storyline even more interesting. Jordan's father played for the Vikings, creating one of those full-circle football moments that fans love imagining. But this isn't just nostalgia. Last season proved Jordan still has something left. After several quieter years, he exploded back with 10.5 sacks and reminded the entire league why he's been respected for so long. What stood out most wasn't simply the production, it was when it happened. At an age when many pass rushers are fading away, Jordan found another gear. Sia Munson compared the situation to those late-career Everson Griffin years when every snap carried the possibility of a game-changing moment. That comparison feels meaningful because Vikings fans know exactly what that looks like. You may not need a player to dominate every down. Sometimes you just need somebody capable of wrecking a crucial play when it matters most. If Dallas Turner were to miss time, suddenly depth becomes a major concern. That reality alone could make a veteran addition appealing. Whether Jordan fits Brian Flores' vision remains to be seen, but the fact that his name keeps resurfacing suggests the Vikings may still be evaluating every possible option. And now we get to the story that might be the most important of them all because it speaks directly to what this team could become in 2026. For years, Vikings fans have heard endless discussions about quarterbacks, offenses, and flashy skill players. But right now, the greatest advantage Minnesota may possess sits on the defensive side of the ball. According to Bleacher Report's Gary Davenport, the Vikings enter the season with the best defense in the entire NFC North. Think about that for a second. In a division loaded with talent and loaded with expectations, Minnesota stands alone in those rankings. Not Detroit, not Green Bay, not Chicago, Minnesota. And a huge reason for that is Brian Flores. The fact that Flores returned this offseason might end up being one of the most underrated victories the organization achieved. His defense has transformed dramatically over the last few years. The improvement against the pass has been remarkable. The aggressiveness, the creativity, the confidence. It's become the identity of this football team. Of course, there are still questions. Harrison Smith is gone, and replacing a player like that is never simple. Veterans, such as Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, are no longer here either. Young players must step forward. New faces must earn trust. That's where the challenge begins. But there's also legitimate optimism. Andrew Van Ginkel remains one of the smartest defenders in football. Blake Cashman continues to anchor the middle. Byron Murphy, Isaiah Rodgers, Joshua Metellus, Jalen Redmond, and rookie Caleb Banks all have important roles to play. The expectations are rising because the standard has risen. That's what happens when a defense finishes near the top of the league. The rest of the NFC North will be trying to prove those rankings wrong. For perhaps the first time in a while, Minnesota has a chance to prove they're right. At the end of the day, every one of these stories connects to a bigger picture. The Vikings aren't rebuilding. They're trying to sustain something. They're trying to protect the core of a defense that has become one of the league's most respected units while also searching for the final pieces that could push them even further. Whether it's extending Blake Cashman, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Brian O'Neill, adding a veteran pass rusher like Kyle Van Noy or Cameron Jordan, or proving they truly own the best defense in the NFC North, the stakes feel real. Let me know which story matters most to you because this offseason is quietly setting the stage for everything that comes next. The answers may not arrive immediately, but the decisions are getting closer. And as always, Vikings Nation, no matter what happens, we ride together. Stay tuned. Skol Vikings, let's go.